mimer. In a certain sense, this is a summary of everything we learned in Torah Or. It's a mimer that has all the different terms that we learned.
Okay.
Mamish everything. Sovev and Memale, Iskafe and Isapcha, Ispashtus and Helem Vigilui, Malchus, everything together, everything in one mimer. I wanted to, maybe if we have time during the rest of the week, to see the origin of this mimer, which they didn't bring here in the notes. There's a short mimer in Ma'amarei Admor Zaken HaKetzarim from 12 years earlier that has the source of what this mimer, much shorter, of course, he says.
How come we have all these Ma'amarim when there was supposed to be a fire in this? The Alter Rebbe's library burned down.
Imagine how much there was. I don't know if the Ma'amarim were burnt. It could be that there were copies of them. What I know was burnt was a Shulchan Aruch.
Right.
So the pasuk is, it's not the very beginning of the parsha, but it's at the beginning. It's in the second section, paragraph. It says, "Vayomer Moshe el kol adat bnei Yisrael lemor, ze hadavar asher tzivah Hashem lemor." This is one of the 8 places that Moshe uses. This is what God commanded, saying. So this ze hadavar, that's his special nevuah. And it says, "K'chu me'itchem teruma laHashem," take from you a donation to Hashem. Kol nediv libo yevia et terumat Hashem. All those who bring from their heart should bring the donation of Hashem. So you have here Turma la Hashem, and you can already hear it. Turma in Hebrew, even though we translate it as a donation, it means to lift, to elevate. So it's elevating to Hashem. That's basically how you would read it. You can literally. Et Terumat Hashem is saying the elevation of Hashem. There's to Hashem and of Hashem. So right away, Zahav v'chesef v'nechoshet, so gold and silver and copper. So this is in Exodus 35:5. So the Alter Rebbe takes this and he says, why do we have twice? Why did it say twice? K'chu me'itchem teruma laHashem. Take from you a donation or an elevation to Hashem, to God. Kol nediv libo yevia et terumat Hashem. All those who bring from their heart should bring. Again, he should have said the elevation to Hashem, but now he says the elevation of Hashem, or the donation of Hashem. So right away we have to say, obviously, that there are they signify 2 different aspects of the relationship between us and God. Elevating to Hashem is obviously what we do. We elevate things from below to above. And the elevation of Hashem is the result. Is that Hashem brings down the elevation. And we've been calling this Ahavat Olam and Ahava Rabbah. That I meditate on connecting to God. And the result is that God gives me a level of connection that's not dependent on my meditation. So that's called an awakening from below that causes an awakening from above, and so on. So he finds the same thing in this verse. But he's going to use this to explain a lot of the terms that we've seen throughout the entire volume. And so it's going to be a very good summary for everything that we've seen. Hinei Truma Lashon Rememut. Truma, which we translate as a donation or a gift or whatever, is also from the meaning of elevation, Romemut. Aromimcha Elokai HaMelech, I will elevate or exalt you, Hashem my God. Vegam Truma, and also means Lashon Hafrasha, La'afrish Truma, it also means to set something apart. Okay, so there's setting something apart to God, and there's God setting something apart. That's what comes out here. To understand the idea of elevation or exalting. We know that there are 2 different aspects to the world's existence in the sense of Ishtalshalus. And Ishtalshalus we translate as like evolution, not evolution, the biological idea of evolution, but the general philosophical idea of evolution, which means that you go from something that is, by the way, the opposite of how evolution is. You go from the complex to the simple. You go from something that was higher, all-encompassing, and it slowly comes down. And it's revealed in two different ways. They're called Memale Kol Almin and Sovev Kol Almin. The light that fills our worlds and the light that surrounds our worlds. So he starts out with Memale. Okay, Memale, הוא כמשל הנשמה שמחיה את הגוף ומתלבשת פה להחיות בבחינת התחלקות מחשבה ודיבור ומעשה והתלבשות המוחין בראש וכן בכל איבר חיות פרטי. So Memale means enclosement. We've been talking about it a lot. In enclosement, it depends on the vessel. So therefore it divides differently. The neshama, when it enters the body, it enters in the sense of memale, in the sense of something that's coming down from a more complex place to a more simple place. It's coming down with distinction between the different places where it comes down. So part of the neshama gives life force to the brain. So you get thought. Part of it gives to the speech organs. So you get speech. And part of it gives life to the other organs. So you get actions. And this is all called islapshus. It's all called engarment or enclosement. And now he says, in parentheses, because it's a long explanation that he now gives for what this means, שהחיות מתלבש בכל איבר לפי מזגו ותכונתו. We said in enclosement, the light that comes in, the energy that comes in, is differentiated by the organ, by the vessel. דהיינו שכללות גילוי חיות הנשמה במוחין. Like it says in other places, in the beginning, the general life force of the neshama appears in the mind. And from there, it's drawn down into each vessel, into each organ, according to what that organ can receive. בעין נמשך מתלבש כוח הראייה, in the eye you get the eyesight, באוזן נמשך מתלבש כוח השמיעה, in the ear you hear. בכוח המעשה נמשך מתלבש בידיים, the power of action is drawn into the hands. עד כוח ההילוך שנמשך מתלבש ברגליים, until the power of walking or progressing, which goes into the feet. נמצא האור והחיות מהיר מתלבש בכל כלי לפי בחינתו ומהותו. The most important thing is that there is differentiation in this life force. It depends on which vessel it's going in. That's how it's going to appear. It's going to reveal itself based on the vessel. ואף על פי כן, יש בהם הערה, ועל כן במוחין מאיר הערה וחיות יותר גדול. Therefore, because the drawing down begins, the first appearance of the neshama is from the mind, so the greatest light, as it were, the greatest feeling of the neshama is in the mind. And another way of saying this, he also says, is that the vessel of the mind, the brain, is much clearer. That was the way that they saw things in the Middle Ages, in the early modern period also. That the more, they called it mezukach, they called it purified, pristine. That the more pristine the material, the more ability there is to reveal the life force within that material. When the life force goes into that material, it's revealed more. So they said that the mind, the brain, is the most pristine. Now you can see that they're not talking about something physical, because when you compare the brain to other tissues in the body, I don't think you see anything more clear in the brain or more pristine in the brain. It's mush like everything else. So they weren't talking about that. Exactly what they were talking about, I don't know. Today we would say that when you fashion, when you create, I don't know, the microchips, so you have to be in a very, very clean environment. Okay, so they have these clean rooms where the wafers come out, where they're fabricated. So there is something to do with pristine in the sense of cleanliness or something like that, but it's not, I don't know if that's what they meant. Literally what they meant was, of course, that somehow the brain was of a different material. Exactly what that meant, I don't know. Therefore, in the brain, in the mind, because of the brain, you feel more life force. Because the vessel is more cleansed, it's more pristine. Therefore, it can receive greater light. V'hi gilui hasechel v'hamachshava, and it's revealed. The revelation of this energy becomes what we call thought. But it's not that the soul that comes into the body is thought. It's not thought. In the brain, it's revealed as thought. In the eye, it's revealed as eyesight, and so on.
How's that division carried out? Not physically, but spiritually.
That Talmud Torah keneged kulam. That we say that when you have mitzvahs to do, the most important mitzvah in the end is to learn Torah, because that includes everything. That's how the Tanya explains. Really, why does Torah include everything? Certainly, somebody could argue the opposite. What was the first sin that Adam did? He ate from the tree of knowledge. So why is it that eating from the tree of knowledge has become a mitzvah? So we say, no, we're not eating from the tree of knowledge, we're eating from the tree of life. Still, we understand that we're doing the same thing. We're thinking. We're using our brain. So the answer is because the whole reason was forbidden wasn't because God doesn't want you to know. He wants you to know. That's in fact the most important thing, which is why because it was so important, it had more restrictions on it. Because other things were less important, they had no restrictions on them. And that's the way you need to think about it. So the restriction, what was the restriction? The restriction was don't eat from it until I tell you that you can eat from it, which was Shabbos. So they only had to wait for 3 hours, as the Arizal says, or however. You could build it in other ways. But the restriction is always on something that's important. That, in the same way that we also have restrictions about knowledge still in Yiddishkeit. Meaning, don't go and read idolatrous books. Don't go and read pornography. Don't go and do this. Don't go. It's knowledge. What do you want? What's wrong with it? No, not all knowledge is good for you. You have to be smart enough to understand what you want to learn and what you don't want to learn. So Torah is all the tree of life. So it's all permissible. But again, it's because of the importance. So the importance of knowledge is so great that we say that in the end, learning Torah is equal to all the other mitzvot. That's like saying that the brain has more life force, more revelation of the neshama, of the soul, than all the other organs. Which is not the same way in the hands, for instance. The hands cannot receive or cannot reveal the full gamut of the spirituality of the soul. They can only do so much. Therefore, the only thing that is engarbed in them, in the hands, is the power of action of the soul. Still, the hands are more than the feet, for instance, which only have the power of movement, progress. Of course, we've seen that people who don't have hands learn how to use their feet like hands, almost. They can do most things that we can do with our hands. So one would say it depends on how you develop the vessel also. It's not just that, but nobody starts out trying to feed themselves with their feet if they have hands. Okay, nobody does it naturally. So naturally, there's something in the hands that is more inclined to allowing us to act. And there's something more in the feet. You could also walk on your hands, but nobody starts out doing that naturally. Maybe some people do it. There are exceptions. So that means that the hands, they don't like course in the same way that the brain doesn't like walking. I guess you could walk in your brain. You could jump up and down in your head, like a reverse pogo stick or something. But nobody does that. Why? Because the brain is suitable for something else. In any case, so the hands are more than the feet in that sense. In the hand you can use for actions, for all kinds of delicate work, and to write. So the mind, even though it is not openly, you can't see the mind in their hand, you can see through the actions the mindset of the person. Because again, everything is coming, it's it's being drawn down from the source of where the soul is being revealed in the body, which is in the brain. And so therefore you have these interesting things, like from the Maggid, who saw a watch, and he said the watchmaker was blind. And that's where the blind watchmaker comes from. It's actually from a story from the Maggid. So they asked him, how can you tell? Because you only see the watch. You didn't see the guy who made it. So he says, when a watchmaker back then makes the watch by hand, so it's a very small mechanism. So they used a magnifying glass that they used to put inside their eye like this. And they had to squint, so they had to close the other eye in order to see clearly. But he, I mean, it wasn't blind, he was blind in one eye. That's what he said. So he says, so when they squint, because they squint, so here's Paula's, thing about the, what do you call them? Shririm tabatim. How do you say that? Sphincter muscles. Mm-hmm. So when you squint, you're actually tensing your whole body because of the sphincter. There's a sphincter here muscle. It's like all the round muscles are sphincters. You're flexing everything. Everything's tense. And so he says, even when he comes to tighten the springs, so he does it. The watchmaker who sees, who has to squint, so he tightens it more. There's more strength in the tightening. But this watchmaker, I looked at the springs and they're not tightened the same way. So I know that he didn't have to squint. So he must be blind in the other eye because he doesn't have to squint in order to see just through one eye. So he says everything in the end, how the mind sees things, is reflected somehow in the rest of the body. That's the main thing. And that's why there's so much power to the power of the mind. The mind can suggest, power of suggestion. It can suggest many things to the body and change it. Because that's where all the life force is drawn from. That's why medicine, I have to ask you a question, somebody who knows something about these things. Who got the idea, how did this actually happen, that public health became a branch of medicine? How did that happen? Since when can medicine be done for more than one person? I've never heard of such a thing anywhere in the history of medicine. Medicine has always been practiced, always, on an individual. And everybody knows, every doctor knows, every individual is different.
It started basically from people like Lister, who were cleansing, washing their hands before they do operations, and typhoid.
That's beautiful. Why is that medicine? There's nothing to do with medicine.
No, it is.
Why?
Because he said that you do an operation, if you cut people up, you have to wash your hands, you have to get cleanliness. So he introduced cleanliness and health into the whole.
That's beautiful. That's not medicine.
Yes, it is.
Those are procedures.
It's one of the steps.
But it's not medicine.
And typhoid, clearing typhoid.
If you clean your hands if the doctor cleans his hands from now till the end of time, no patient is going to get healthy. What you're saying is, I want to prevent other things.
Right.
That's not a medicine. That's something else.
And what about all the, the Kisuni?
Right. So it's an outgrowth of that, but it's not medicine. It's something else.
But stopping typhoid was part of medicine. I can't stop typhoid in this patient until I make sure that everybody is keeping cleanliness.
But again, in this patient is still medicine. Doing what you need to do for the public, keeping the sewer system running, whatever else, that's not medicine. That's like saying, I need electricity in order to operate, because I can't operate if I can't see what I'm doing. What's the difference? These are external factors that have nothing to do with the medicine itself. You're not going to operate on every single person the same way. You're going to take a CAT scan and you're going to decide, this person I'm going to do this way. You don't do it one size fits all. That's not how medicine is done.
There are certain basic things which is one size fits all.
It's fine, but that's like electricity. That's got nothing to do with medicine. What I'm saying is there was a spillover. What they did was they took a concept that doesn't belong in medicine, which is fine. It's needed to do medicine. It's a supportive concept, but it's not medicine itself. And now when you come and say every single person has to get a vaccine, you're going against the grain of medicine. Now it comes into conflict with medicine. Because to make sure that there's light in the operating room and that there's cleanliness and sterility and this and that, etc., that doesn't interfere at all with the decision of the doctor what this individual patient needs. But the moment that you decided that vaccines are part of medicine, then you've said that medicine is no longer going to be practiced on an individual basis. That's nuts. That's not medicine. That's something else.
Interesting.
Nobody's ever made this simple argument that this has no room in medicine?
Nobody's allowed to say anything. Nobody's allowed to speak.
No, but vaccines started at some point. Nobody said, why are you giving everybody a vaccine? Not everybody needs it. Or at least that you have to make some kind of claim, some kind of understanding that, even if the vaccine, even if you see it as a remedy, let's say you see it as a remedy, so still a doctor should prescribe it. To prescribe blanket to everybody the same thing? I've never heard of such a medicine. Where did that?
Initially, all the vaccines, the flu vaccines and everything in this country were on a named patient basis prescription.
Right, that's what it should be. If at all.
But then those clever people who know everything decided that everybody's got to get one anyway, regardless of who, what, where, once you're over the age of 60. So therefore, nurses were allowed to give them out without a prescription from a doctor.
Why? How did that
Save
happen?
time and money. Save time and money.
What's
Once
that
upon a
good?
time, a dentist would look at your mouth. Now a dentist doesn't. You have a dental hygienist who looks at your mouth.
No.
A dentist does other things.
No, but the dentist takes x-rays, he checks everything, he decides what he's going to do with you. He doesn't say, well, everybody has 32 teeth, so I'm going to do this.
Everybody has to go to the hygienist.
The hygienist is a cleaner, it's something else. And even the hygienist has to look at what they're doing. They can't, there's no machine that does it. And even if there ever was a machine, it would have to look at what your mouth looks like. And it would have to fit itself to your specific needs. How can medicine be done? How can you say a vaccine is like electricity? It's not. I mean, you're putting it into the body. What are you saying? That this is... I don't understand this. I don't understand where the leap was made, and how come nobody's up and shouting about it.
A lot of people are shouting about it.
That doesn't seem...
A lot of people don't want to take vaccines. A lot of people are opposed to it. The big school of thought that says that they're dangerous. But they usually get shouted down.
By whom? Public health?
No.
But they're not doctors.
The drug companies.
How do the drug companies have anything to do with it?
Because they're the ones who are making the money. They're the ones who are bankrolling all the doctors.
But doctors don't care that their profession is being taken away from them?
Don't think they've thought about it.
They've not thought about it? If you ever tell a doctor, try telling a doctor, any doctor, you don't get to choose what medicine I'm going to take. The state is going to decide what medicine I'm going to take.
The doctor doesn't choose what medicine.
What? They'll never let you. Imagine coming to...
The doctor does not choose what medicine.
Of course he does.
No, he doesn't.
He has a list of...
The doctor has a list of about 10 or 15 medicines.
He has a PDR, and he chooses what he wants.
Which has been pushed into him by the drug company.
Said it, but there's nothing else to offer. But he decides in the end.
There's always plenty of other choices.
What are the plenty of other choices? Bed rest? What do you mean?
No. For every disease, there's at least 100 different drugs.
Okay, fine.
In his list, 3 or 4, because that's what the drug companies have shoved down his throat.
That's a different question about how do we manage the money that we spend on drugs? How does the state manage the money that it spends on drugs? You're right. There's always more. I'm talking about, let's say, not something that's life-saving or anything like that. That's readily available. I don't know. What you call it? Omeprazole, whatever. So there's 10 different types, 15 different types. You can get any of them. He decides, and he sees, oh, this one doesn't agree with him. Let's switch it to the other type, the other type. What's the big difference between them? Not very big, but there's differences. Okay, the whole PPP is, or whatever it's called, the PPI isn't working. Let's go antihistamine. Let's go in this direction, that direction. He's the one who decides. Since when is medicine done by a public health official? That's nuts. He's not a doctor, and it's not medicine. What happened?
Public health doctors are physicians.
No, because they're doing public health. It shouldn't be called medicine. It's the same. It's, in my opinion, it's the same thing as saying that the guy who works in the electric company is a doctor, because he makes sure that there's electricity in the hospital. Some kind of shift happened here. There's a huge leap, and the real reason it came up in my mind over the last couple of days is because when the Torah says that the doctor has permission to heal, it's talking about a doctor. It's talking about a doctor who sees a patient. I don't know. I've never seen. I haven't seen everything. I've never seen anybody claim that you can heal everybody at the same time. If there's any kind of support for that, it was actually in this week's Parsha. The Moshe Rabbeinu gave everybody who worshipped the Egel, who worshipped the golden calf, he gave them to drink from the dust that he had ground it up into. He gave everybody the same potion. Seder. So maybe there is such a thing. But Moshe Rabbeinu has that privilege. Every doctor has that privilege. Every health official has that privilege to say everybody should get this.
It is an interesting question which needs a lot of thought.
Sure. I think it needs to be addressed to the poskim who should think about this. Is this what God gave permission?
You're going to leave religion in the hands of rabbis.
What?
You're going to leave religion in the hands of rabbis?
No, I'm not interested in religion. I'm interested in halacha. From a halachic perspective, can you say that this falls under nitna reshut l'rofeh? Meaning, do you even ask a doctor? Is there, like, if a doctor comes to you and says you should take the vaccine? Okay. Maybe.
The doctors in this country have been brainwashed and forced.
So that's everywhere.
Various, mechanisms that they wouldn't dare say to somebody, "Don't take the vaccine." Lose their job.
Anyway, getting back. Why do we even get into this?
I don't know. You suddenly brought it up.
It's been sitting in my head for the last 2 days. I had to speak to somebody who knew something about medicine and public health. So. But anyway. Still, even though the hands reveal, because of the individuality, that everything that has to do with life force is individual. It's individual in the body itself, and it's individual between people, meaning each part of the body receives a different life force, and each part of the world, meaning every person receives. Again, this is to explain why in the end God is one, the life force is one, but every person reflects it in a different way, because each individual is where? In our vessels, in our body. Still, as much as the hand reveals the higher force of action, and it's higher in that respect from the foot, which can only walk, still there is some superiority to the foot in the fact that it can carry the head, whereas the hands don't normally do that. So you can carry it from place to place, and the hands don't do that. So here we have a very interesting thing, that even though we're talking about engarment, we're talking about memale kol almin, even in memale kol almin, even in the light that fills our world, which is differentiated based on the nature of each vessel, there is a concept of the end is wedged in the beginning. So the end, the foot, has a special connection with the head. So that's very interesting, because I would have thought that when you say that the end isn't wedged in the beginning, you're talking about the sovev kolamin, that makes everything equal. But he says, no, this is like the aspect of sovev within memale. That even though memale is all hierarchical, the fact that you say the end is connected to the very top, how would that work? That's like saying it's cyclical. But it's not exactly cyclical. Why? Because you're jumping, you're making a leap from the bottom back to the top. Okay? So it's not like sovev. Sovev means everything is the same. Everything all the way through would have been equal. So the brain would have been equal, the eye would have been equal, the ear would have been, everybody would have been on the same footing. They all reveal the life force of the soul equally. We know that's not true, because in the body, each organ reveals it differently. And yet, even though this is a hierarchical revelation, the bottom, the very end, is specially connected. It's like short-circuited with the top. So there's an aspect of things being equal, but only at the top and the bottom. Right? So there's an infiltration, as it were, of the anti-hierarchical within the hierarchical. So it's a sovev within the memale. This is a very important point that he put here. I don't remember him saying it anywhere before. Before I read this, I didn't know which way to go. Is this principle? It's a principle from Sefer Yetzirah. It's a very early principle. So is this principle part of the hierarchical picture of the world, or is it a picture of the flat picture of the world, meaning that the sovev, that everything is equal? So he says here, no, this is a principle of the hierarchical. That even though there's a huge difference between the head and the feet, they're connected in a special way. And the way you see it is because the feet carry the head. It's a very important understanding.
I'm not quite sure I understand it exactly.
Would be like saying that even though there's a huge difference between the king and the servant, only the king and the servant can be in the inner chamber together. The ministers can't, the regular citizens can't, even the electrician can't. It's only the guy who takes care, the lowest on the rung of hierarchy is the one who's with the king when he's bathing. He's the only one. So there's like some kind of, even though you have this very strong hierarchy, there's a very strong connection between the beginning and the end. It's like a short circuit of the whole hierarchy. And so that's another example. In the body, it means that somehow the feet are more connected. Where would you see this? This is like the theory behind...
If you've got a toenail stuck into your foot, you can't walk. So the brain can't overcome that.
Yeah, but you also can't think if you have a nail stuck in your hand.
No, you can't walk.
Upset of it. Who wants to walk when you have a nail stuck in your hand? No, I was thinking of what's it called? What's the thing they do in the feet? It's this whole theory.
There's some referral.
Yeah. It's like acupuncture, but it's like just pressure.
They read
So what's it?
There's a guy who does it.
There's a lot of people do this.
He does it in that shoe.
So they have a whole map of the whole body
Yeah.
on the two soles of the feet. And what's the idea? The idea really is that this is based on that there's a connection between the feet and the head. And just in the same way that but why go that far? Well, because it's easy. It's easier to stick my feet out, take my shoes off, take my socks off, and stick it out for somebody else to smell and poke, than it is to work on my head to suggest how my body should work. It's easier to let somebody else do it.
Does it work?
Some people say it does. I don't know if it works or not. What's interesting is the idea. So where did the idea come from? The idea is from this, that the feet are somehow connected to the head more than anything else. So I'm 15.
Okay.
So we'll finish here.
Okay.
And
I
continue
still
tomorrow.
prefer to use the original.
What? Really?
Because this is like, making it too easy.